Why would an energy drink company spend years building sports teams, producing films, organizing extreme events, publishing magazines, and operating a global media network? At first, the answer seems obvious. Red Bull sells drinks, so all of this must simply be advertising. But that explanation is incomplete. Most consumer brands follow a familiar model. They create a product, buy media space, run campaigns, and compete for attention inside channels controlled by television networks, publishers, platforms, and event organizers. The larger the campaign, the more attention the brand can rent. When the spending stops, much of that attention disappears with it. Red Bull chose a different path. Instead of limiting itself to commercials, sponsorship logos, and short promotional campaigns, the company began investing in the things people actually wanted to watch. It supported athletes. It created competitions. It entered Formula One. It produced films, documentaries, live broadcasts, music content, print publications, and digital programming. Eventually, this activity became large enough to operate through Red Bull Media House, a global media company established in 2007. That decision raises an important question. Why would a beverage company build an entire media operation instead of simply spending more on traditional advertising? The common belief is that media exists to support marketing. A company makes a product, then uses content to promote it. Under this view, films, events, and sports sponsorships are communication tools. Their purpose is to keep the brand visible and make the product more desirable. But Red Bull's behavior suggests something more deliberate. The company did not only place its name beside exciting content. It helped create the athletes' event stories and distribution channels that generated that content. It was no longer just paying to appear in front of an audience assembled by someone else. It was building the conditions in which an audience could form around Red Bull itself. This distinction matters because energy drinks are not impossible to copy. Competitors can develop similar products, use similar ingredients, design bold packaging, and compete for the same retail space. They can also buy advertising around the same sports, music, and youth culture. What is harder to copy is an ecosystem of attention built over decades. A single advertisement can communicate energy. A live event can make people feel it. A film can turn it into a story. An athlete can embody it. A media network can repeat and distribute that meaning across markets, platforms, and generations. That does not automatically make every piece of content valuable. It also does not prove that media replaces advertising. Red Bull still needs distribution, retail execution, pricing, product quality, and paid promotion. The deeper issue is whether Red Bull's media investments were designed only to sell more cans in the short term, or whether they created something more durable, a way to control how the brand enters culture, reaches consumers, and accumulates attention over time. To understand that, we need to look at the problem Red Bull faced before it became a media business at all. To understand why this approach became possible, we have to go back to where Red Bull began. The company was founded in 1984 after Austrian entrepreneur Dietrich Mateschitz partnered with Thai businessman Chaleo Yuvidia. Inspired by a local energy drink in Thailand, they adapted the formula, redesigned the branding, and introduced Red Bull in Austria on April 1, 1987. According to the company, this launch did not simply introduce a new brand. It helped establish an entirely new product category, the energy drink. That distinction was important. Consumers already understood what a cola was. They understood coffee. They understood bottled water. But an energy drink had no established place in everyday life. Before convincing people to choose Red Bull over competitors, the company first had to convince them that this category deserved to exist. This presented a marketing challenge that traditional advertising could not solve on its own. A commercial can describe what a product does. It can claim that a drink provides energy or improves focus. But those messages become much more difficult to sustain when competitors can make similar claims. Functional benefits are easy to communicate. They are also relatively easy to imitate. Red Bull needed something that competitors could not copy overnight. Instead of defining itself through ingredients or taste, the company gradually built an identity around moments where physical and mental performance mattered. Extreme sports, aviation, mountain biking, snowboarding, surfing, motorsports, music festivals, and creative culture were not random sponsorship choices. Together, They created an environment where the idea of energy became visible rather than simply described. This strategy also changed the relationship between the brand and its audience. Rather than interrupting consumers while they were watching something else, Red Bull increasingly became associated with experiences people actively wanted to follow. Fans tuned in to watch athletes push boundaries, teams compete, or creators attempt extraordinary challenges. The product remained present, but it rarely became the center of attention. This approach reflected a broader shift taking place across media and consumer behavior. As digital platforms expanded and audiences became fragmented, reaching people through traditional mass advertising became more complex. Consumers gained more control over what they watched, skipped, shared, and ignored. Attention was becoming harder to purchase and easier to lose. For brands, visibility alone was no longer enough. At the same time, sponsorship also had clear limitations. Even if a company sponsored a major sporting event, the event itself still belonged to someone else. Television rights belonged to broadcasters. Editorial coverage belonged to publishers. Digital conversations unfolded on platforms controlled by technology companies. A sponsor could buy exposure, but it rarely owned the story being told. That difference became increasingly significant as media consumption shifted toward content that people chose instead of content that interrupted them. By the early 2000s, Red Bull had already built strong associations with action sports and youth culture across multiple markets. The company had proven that these investments could strengthen its brand identity. Yet much of the value created through those events still flowed through external media organizations responsible for filming, broadcasting, publishing, and distributing the content. The next strategic decision would fundamentally change that relationship. Instead of relying primarily on others to capture and distribute the stories surrounding its events and athletes, Red Bull began investing in the ability to produce, own, and distribute those stories itself. That shift became official in 2007 with the creation of Red Bull Media House. On paper, establishing a media company might look like a branding exercise. In practice, it represented a very different strategic decision. Instead of depending primarily on broadcasters, publishers, and production companies to tell stories about Red Bull's athletes and events, the company began building the capability to create, produce, manage, and distribute those stories itself. According to Red Bull Media House, its business spans television, digital platforms, publishing, audio, film production, content licensing, and global distribution. In other words, Red Bull was no longer investing only in marketing campaigns. It was investing in media infrastructure. That distinction becomes clearer when looking at how the system actually works. Consider an athlete sponsored by Red Bull. The relationship no longer ends with a logo on a helmet or a racing suit. The athlete becomes part of a much larger storytelling network. Training sessions become documentary footage. Competitions become live broadcasts. Behind-the-scenes moments become social media content. Interviews become editorial articles. Achievements become films that continue attracting audiences years after the original event. Each activity produces multiple forms of media that can be distributed across different channels instead of disappearing once a competition ends. The same logic applies to Red Bull's events. Competitions such as Red Bull Rampage, Red Bull Air Race, and numerous mountain biking, surfing, snowboarding, and motorsport events do more than generate spectators on a single day. They continuously produce footage, photographs, interviews, highlights, documentaries, and news coverage that can be repurposed across platforms and territories. Red Bull also expanded into publishing through the Red Bulletin, a magazine focused on sport, adventure, innovation, and culture rather than product promotion. Instead of functioning like a catalog, it reinforced the world that Red Bull wanted audiences to associate with its brand. At the same time, Red Bull Content Pool gave media organizations access to professionally produced photography and video from the company's athletes and events. Rather than waiting for journalists to create stories, Red Bull increasingly supplied ready-to-use material that could be distributed through newspapers, broadcasters' websites, and digital publishers around the world. Perhaps the clearest demonstration of this strategy came in 2012. Red Bull Stratos was presented as a scientific and engineering mission in which Felix Baumgartner ascended nearly 39 kilometers above Earth before performing the highest freefall in history. The event became one of the largest live media moments of its time. Millions watched the jump live, while recordings continued accumulating hundreds of millions of additional views across digital platforms in the years that followed. What mattered strategically was not only the scale of the audience. Red Bull controlled far more than a sponsorship position. It helped conceive the mission. It coordinated production. It owned extensive footage. It created documentaries. It supplied content for broadcasters. It extended the story long after the jump itself had ended. The investment generated a library of media assets instead of a single advertising campaign. The same pattern appeared in motorsport. When Red Bull Racing won its first Formula One Constructors' Championship in 2010, followed by multiple championship-winning seasons, each victory became more than a sporting achievement. Every race weekend generated continuous stories, interviews, technical analysis, documentaries, photographs, and digital content that strengthened the company's media ecosystem while reinforcing the brand's association with elite performance. At this point, the pattern becomes difficult to ignore. Red Bull was not simply producing more content than other consumer brands. It was gradually assembling an interconnected system where athletes' events, production capabilities, publishing platforms, and distribution channels reinforced one another. The remaining question is what this system was actually designed to achieve beyond producing compelling media. The evidence points toward a conclusion that is very different from the one most people assume. Red Bull did not build a media business because advertising had stopped working. It built a media business because advertising and media ownership solved two completely different problems. Traditional advertising buys access to an audience that somebody else has already gathered. A television network owns its viewers. A publisher owns its readers. A social platform owns its users. A sporting event owns its spectators. The brand pays for temporary visibility inside those environments. When the campaign ends, the relationship largely remains with the owner of the platform, not with the advertiser. That is an efficient way to generate awareness, but it creates an ongoing dependency. Every new campaign begins by purchasing attention again. Red Bull gradually changed the economics of that relationship. By investing in athletes, competitions, production capabilities, publishing, and distribution, the company was not merely creating promotional material. It was creating reasons for people to voluntarily spend time inside a world associated with Red Bull. This distinction is subtle but important. A person does not watch Red Bull Rampage because they want to see an energy drink advertisement. They watch because they enjoy elite mountain biking. Someone does not stream a documentary because they want to consume marketing. They watch because the story itself has value. The content attracts the audience first. The brand becomes part of the experience rather than an interruption to it. That is why the different pieces of Red Bull's ecosystem reinforce one another. An event creates footage. The footage becomes films, articles, interviews, and social media clips. Those stories strengthen the reputation of athletes and teams. The athletes generate future stories. Each new piece of content increases the value of the existing ecosystem, instead of standing alone as an isolated campaign. The company is not repeatedly purchasing attention. It is continuously expanding assets that can keep generating attention. This also explains why Red Bull Media House extends beyond producing videos for the company's own channels. Its activities include content licensing, partnerships, publishing, and distribution across multiple platforms. Media is treated as an operational capability rather than a communication department. The value therefore extends beyond immediate product promotion. It creates a growing library of intellectual property, production expertise, long-term relationships with athletes and creators, distribution partnerships, and a recognizable editorial identity. None of these assets disappear when a single advertising campaign finishes. At the same time, it is important not to overstate the argument. Red Bull has never abandoned conventional marketing. The company still relies on retail distribution, product innovation, sponsorship agreements, paid promotion, and commercial partnerships. Owning media does not eliminate the need for advertising. Instead, it changes the role advertising plays. Rather than creating awareness from nothing, paid media can amplify stories, events, and experiences that already exist. This distinction also explains why copying Red Bull is far more difficult than simply increasing a marketing budget. Building a media ecosystem requires years of investment, creative capability, production infrastructure, trusted relationships, distribution networks, and content that audiences genuinely choose to consume. Without those elements, a company does not build a media business. It simply produces more branded content that competes for the same limited attention as every other advertisement. Seen from this perspective, Red Bull's most valuable investment was not another commercial or another sponsorship. It was the gradual construction of a system capable of creating audiences instead of constantly renting access to them. That shift changes the way we should think about the relationship between media and marketing. And it leads directly to the broader lesson behind Red Bull's strategy. Looking back, Red Bull's strategy becomes easier to understand once we stop treating media as a marketing expense and start viewing it as a business capability. Every major decision we have examined points in the same direction. The company did not simply sponsor athletes. It built long-term relationships that continuously generated stories. It did not simply organize events. It created experiences that could become films, articles, broadcasts, photographs, documentaries, and digital content. It did not simply publish content. It invested in the infrastructure needed to produce, manage, license, and distribute that content across multiple markets and platforms. Each layer reinforced the next. The result was a system in which one investment could create value many times over. A single event could attract spectators. The same event could generate editorial coverage. It could produce documentaries years later. It could strengthen the reputation of athletes. It could supply material for media partners. It could provide content for Red Bull's own channels. And throughout that entire process, the brand remained connected to experiences that audiences actively chose to consume. That explains why Red Bull's media strategy cannot be evaluated by asking whether it generated enough views or whether it produced direct advertising revenue. Those measurements capture only a small part of what the company was building. The larger achievement was creating an environment in which consumers repeatedly encountered the brand through experiences they valued rather than interruptions they tolerated. This is also why Red Bull's approach remains difficult to replicate. Many companies can produce videos. Many companies can sponsor sporting events. Many companies can hire creative agencies. Far fewer companies build an ecosystem where content, events, production, distribution, partnerships, and brand identity strengthen one another over decades. That kind of system becomes an asset in its own right. Red Bull's own business results illustrate the scale the company has reached alongside this long-term strategy. According to the company's official figures, Red Bull sold nearly 14 billion cans in 2025 across 178 countries while generating more than 12 billion euros in annual revenue. Those results cannot be attributed to media alone. Product quality, global distribution, pricing, execution, retail relationships, and operational excellence all remain essential parts of the business. But the evidence suggests that media was never designed to replace those capabilities. It was designed to strengthen them by creating something that traditional advertising alone struggles to build. The most valuable product of Red Bull Media House was not another documentary, another live stream, or another magazine issue. It was a growing audience that willingly returned because the content itself had value. Only after that audience existed did the product gain a more durable place inside people's lives. That is what makes Red Bull's strategy different from simply spending more on promotion. The company did not become more effective because it advertised more creatively. It became more resilient because it gradually reduced its dependence on attention owned by others. In the end, Red Bull was never trying to become a media company instead of an energy drink company. It became a media company because building and owning an audience turned out to be one of the most effective ways to strengthen an energy drink brand over the long term. That may be the most important shift in perspective. The companies that build the strongest brands are not always the ones that buy the most attention. Sometimes they are the ones that create something valuable enough for people to give their attention willingly, long before they decide to make a purchase.